Kibitsu no Kama. There is a saying that a jealous woman tends to disrupt the household and is difficult to control, but on the other hand, it restricts her husband's behavior and naturally makes him stubborn. So even if you find it annoying when you are young, when you look back on it as you get older, you will see that there are good points and benefits to it. Oh, who on earth said this? Even if the damage caused by a jealous woman's jealousy is not too severe, she can cause problems in the family business, break things, or cause mistakes, and she will inevitably be criticized by her neighbors. If the damage is severe, she will lose her home, destroy her country, and become a laughingstock for the whole country. It is unclear how many people have suffered from the poison of jealousy since ancient times. Some jealous women turn into thunderbolts after death or thunder with great force to get revenge on their men. Such women are so stingy that their flesh could be chopped up and salted to make an example of them. However, in reality, such extreme cases are very rare. If a husband controlled himself well and guided his wife, he would naturally be able to avoid the harmful effects of jealousy. However, a little infidelity only feeds on a woman's jealous nature and brings sorrow upon herself. It has been said since ancient times that birds are controlled by a man's spirit alone. But a wife is controlled by her husband's strong and courageous character alone. This is truly true. In the village of Nais in Kayanakori, Kibi province, there lived a man named Izawa Shutayu. My grandfather served the Akamatsu clan of Harima province, but after the Kakitsu War, he left his castle and came to this area, and for 3 generations, up to Shodeyu, the family lived a prosperous life by farming, plowing in the spring and harvesting in the fall. Shodeyu's only son, Shotaro, hated farmers, was addicted to alcohol and sex, and was reluctant to follow his father's orders. So his parents lamented this and took a private consultation, saying, "Oh, please, if Shotaro were to marry the daughter of a decent person who is well-mannered, then his son's condition would surely improve." They searched far and wide throughout the country, but fortunately they found an intermediary. The daughter of Kasadamiki, the chief priest of Kibitsu Shrine, is naturally graceful and well-educated, and is filial to her parents. What's more, she is skilled at reciting waka poetry and playing the koto. The Kasada family is originally descended from the Kamawake clan of Kibi and is of good lineage, so it would surely be a good thing for your family to marry her. I personally hope that this engagement will come to fruition. What do you think?" Hearing this, Shotaro was delighted and said, "That is a good story to hear. This is the foundation of the longevity of my family, but the Kasada family is a distinguished family in this country, and we are farmers of humble origins. Our families are not equal, so it is unlikely that they will accept it." The old matchmaker smiled and said, "You are extremely humble. I will surely be able to arrange it well and get you married." He went straight to the Kasada family to introduce the marriage, and Kasada was delighted and consulted her wife about it, who was equally enthusiastic and said, "My daughter is now 17, and every day I think about whether there is a suitable man for her and how I would like to marry her off to such a person. I have no time to relax. It sounds like a good idea, so please choose an auspicious day quickly and exchange the betrothal gifts," he urged, and the deal was quickly agreed upon, with a reply to this effect sent to Isora. Soon, the betrothal gifts were generously prepared and exchanged. An auspicious day was chosen according to the zodiac, and the wedding was held. To pray to the gods for her daughter's happiness even more, Kasada gathered shrine maidens and celebrants and performed the Mikama Barai ritual, in which hot water is offered in front of the altar. In the first place, people who pray at this shrine usually make numerous offerings in front of the altar and offer the hot water for the Mikamaharai, which is used to divine fortune. When the shrine maiden finishes reciting the prayer and the hot water begins to boil, if it is a good omen, the kettle will make a loud noise like a cow roaring. On the other hand, if it is a bad omen, the kettle will not make a sound. This is called Kibitsu no Okamahari. However, when Kasada performed the kettle purification ritual, the kettle did not make even a faint sound like an autumn insect chirping in the grass, as if the god had not approved of the marriage proposal. Kasada became suspicious and consulted his wife about this sign, but his wife didn't doubt a thing and said, "The kettle didn't make a sound because the bride and groom were defiled. I have heard that once we have exchanged betrothal gifts and promised to become husband and wife, we must not go back on our promise, even if the other party is an enemy or from a faraway country. I have heard that the Izawas are descendants of a prestigious military family and that they are of an upstanding family, so they would not accept my refusal now. In particular, I have heard that the Izawas are descendants of a prestigious military family and that they are of an upstanding family, so they would not accept my refusal now. In particular, my daughter has heard rumors from somewhere that her future husband is handsome, and her heart is fluttering with excitement, counting down the days until the wedding. If she were to hear any bad news now, she may do something foolish. She may regret it at that time, but it would be irreparable. She tried to persuade her husband with all the words she could, but this was probably a natural feeling from a mother's point of view. Hearing this, the husband, as he had always believed this to be a desirable match, did not doubt it any further and followed his wife's words. After Kasada's daughter Isora joined the Izawa family, she worked hard every day, getting up early in the morning and going to bed late at night. She never left her father-in-law and mother-in-law's side, serving them diligently. She understood her husband's nature and served him with all her heart, understanding his nature and serving him to the fullest so that he would like her. Izawa's parents were impressed by Isora's filial piety and chastity, and were overjoyed at having found a good wife. Her husband, Shotaro, was also impressed by her sincerity and found her precious, and they lived a happy and harmonious life together. However, his innate selfish and dissolute nature could not be helped. Before he knew it, Shotaro had become close to a prostitute named Sodi from Tomo no Tsu, and he eventually bought her out and had her live in a concubine's house in a nearby village. He would stay there for days and not return home. Isora felt sad about this, and sometimes she would take the opportunity to scold her father-in-law and mother-in-law for being angry, and other times she would resent her husband's unfaithfulness, but her husband would pay no attention to what his wife said, and he would not return home for over a month. His father-in-law, Shutayu, could not bear to see Isora's heartfelt and pitiful behavior, so he scolded Shotaro severely and finally confined him to a room. Isora felt sad about this, so morning and evening she was especially careful about everything, and served her husband diligently. At the same time, she also secretly delivered things to the mistress's house, showing all her sincerity. One day, when her father was not at home, Shotaro called Isora to him and sweetly said, "Seeing your sincere and heartfelt kindness, I now deeply regret my wrongdoing. I will now break up with that woman and send her back to her birthplace, thus appeasing my father's anger. She is from Inamino in Harima, but she is without parents and in an unfortunate and miserable situation, so I felt sorry for her and took pity on her. If she were to abandon me now, I would surely end up becoming a prostitute in a port town again. Even though we have the same job, people in the capital are more kind-hearted, so I decided to break up with her and send her back to her hometown, thereby appeasing my father's anger. So I want to take her to the capital and have her serve a respectable person. But even so, I'm under house arrest and can't visit her, so she must be in a lot of trouble and need. No one can provide her with travel expenses and clothing to go to the capital. Could you please raise the money and give it to her? Isora was very happy when she asked Neshin and said, if that's the case, you don't have to worry, and secretly sold her clothes and other tools for money, and then told her mother some lies at home to get some money, which she gave to her husband. Shotaro got the money, sneaked out of the house, and ran off to the capital by grabbing her sleeve. Having been deceived so thoroughly, Isora was deeply hurt and ended up bedridden with a serious illness. The Izawa and Kasada families now hated Shotaro and felt sorry for Isora, so they took her to the doctor and hoped for her recovery, but it was to no avail. With each passing day, Isora found it increasingly difficult to even swallow rice porridge, and it seemed as if there was no hope of her ever recovering. Now, here in the village of Arai in Inamigan, Harima province, there lived a man named Hikaroku. He and Sodi were close relatives, being cousins, so Shotaro and his family decided to visit him first and stay there for a while. Hikaroku told Shotaro, just because the capital is a place of great human kindness doesn't mean that all the people there are reliable. Why don't you come and live here instead? Let's share the rice from the same pot and help each other out. This reassuring advice made Shotaro feel relieved and calm, and he decided to live here. Hikaroku rented a shack next door to his house and let Shotaro and his friends live there. He was happy to have someone to talk to. However, while Sodi said she was feeling a bit sick, she suddenly started to get very sick and began to go crazy, as if possessed by a spirit. Shotaro was so sad that she had been hit by such a disaster, even though it had only been a few days since she arrived, that he even forgot to eat and devoted himself to taking care of her. But Sodi just cried out loud, and when she had an attack she looked as if she could not bear the pain in her chest. But when the fever subsided she seemed to be as usual. Shotaro was troubled by this, wondering if she was being cursed by a living spirit, or perhaps the vengeful spirit of his wife, whom he had abandoned in their hometown, was haunting him. Hikaroku tried to calm Shotaro's worries and anxiety by saying, "How can that be? I have seen many cases of epidemics being extremely painful. Once the fever subsides, you forget all the pain you were feeling, as if you had just had a dream." This was the only thing that seemed reassuring. However, there was no sign of care, and Sodi's illness rapidly worsened, and she died 7 days after the onset of the disease. Shotaro looked up to the sky, beat the ground, and cried and lamented his misfortune, going mad and wishing he could die with her. Hikaroku consoled him with various words, saying, "There's nothing we can do at this point," and finally had her cremated. They collected her bones, built a grave, erected a stupa, and asked a monk to perform a generous memorial service for her soul. At this point, Shotaro bowed to the ground and yearned for the underworld where his deceased Sodi lay, but there was no way to seek a law that would summon the souls of the dead back to this world. So he looked up to the sky and thought of the hometown he had left behind, which seemed even more distant than the underworld. He was at a loss as to what to do and spent the whole day sleeping. In the evening, he visited the grave almost every evening, but before he knew it, grass had sprouted on the grave, and the chirping of insects at that time seemed to somehow make him feel lonely. Just as the old song says, the loneliness of autumn had gathered only on him, and he felt the loneliness of autumn and his own loneliness deeply. He noticed that there were other people who had suffered the same misfortune as him, and he noticed a new grave beside him. When he saw the woman visiting the new grave, she looked very sad, placing flowers and pouring water in front of the grave. So he said, "Oh, how pitiful! You are still young and have come to visit a grave in this lonely wilderness, far from civilization." The woman turned around and said, "When I usually visit in the evening, you must have come before me. Perhaps you have been separated from a close relative. I am sorry for your feelings, and I am sorry for you." Shotaro replied, "You are right. About 10 days ago, my dear wife died, and I was left alone with no one to rely on. So visiting here is the only thing I can find comfort in. I'm sure you are in a similar situation." The woman said, "No, I am here to pay my respects at my master's grave, where he was buried on XX/XX. His wife, who was left at home, was so sad that she became seriously ill recently, so I am here to offer incense and flowers instead." Hearing this, Shotaro asked, "It is only natural that your wife became ill. So, who was the deceased, and where did she live?" The woman replied, "Our master was from a distinguished family in this region, but he lost his position and his land due to slander, and since then he has been living in misery in a corner of this field. His wife is a beautiful woman who is known even in neighboring countries, but because of his wife, he lost his house and his land." Hearing this, Shotaro was somehow drawn to her, though not in the usual urge to cheat, and asked, "Is the place where your wife lives alone near here? Let me visit her, and we can talk about our shared sorrows and soothe each other's sorrows. Please take me with you." The woman replied, "The house is a little ways to the side from the road you usually take. His wife has lost someone to rely on and is feeling lonely, so please drop by from time to time. I'm sure she is eagerly waiting for you." Then she walked ahead of him. About 200 meters later, there was a narrow path. After entering this path and walking another 100 meters, there was a small thatched house in a faint forest. The bamboo lattice doors were lonely, and the light of the first quarter moon, which had just turned 7 days old, was shining brightly into the house, making even the small, dilapidated garden clearly visible. The faint light of the lamp filtered through the paper window, creating a somewhat lonely atmosphere. "Please wait here for a moment," said the woman, and went inside. Shotaro stood by the moss-covered old well and peeked into the house. The light of the lamp flickered in the wind through the slightly open sliding doors, and the magnificent black-lacquered shelves sparkled in the light, which he found elegant. The woman came out and said, "I told the lady that you had come to visit, and she said, 'Please come in. I'll talk to you through the window,' and went to the other side of the room. Please come in over there," and led him around the front garden to the back. Looking into the two-room front room, there was a low folding screen wide enough for a person to enter, and from it he could see the edge of an old nightgown, from which he assumed the lady was lying down. Shotaro turned to her and said, "I heard that your husband has died, and that you have become ill. My beloved wife died the other day, and I am experiencing the same grief as you. I thought that at least we could talk about our sorrows and comfort each other, so I came to visit you, even though it was presumptuous." The hostess then opened the screen a little and said, it's been a long time since we last saw you. Let me show you what kind of retribution you will receive for all the cruel treatment you have shown me." Shotaro was shocked, and when he took a closer look, he saw that it was none other than his wife Isora, whom he had abandoned in his hometown. Her face was extremely pale, her eyes were glassy, and her hands, pointing at him, were blue and thin, which was so terrifying that Shotaro cried out, "Ah!" collapsed, and lost consciousness. After a while, he regained consciousness. Gently opening his eyes and looking around, he saw that what he had thought was a house earlier was actually a memorial hall in the cemetery that had been there for a long time, with an old, blackened Buddha statue standing there. Shotaro quickly rose to his feet and ran back home, following the sound of dogs barking in the distant village, and told Hikaroku the whole story. Hikaroku said, "Oh, perhaps you have been tricked by a fox. When you are depressed and frightened, you are sure to be possessed by a delusional god. It is not good for a weak person like you to sink into such an abyss of sadness, so pray to the gods and Buddhas and calm your mind. There is a great priest in Toda village. Go there and have him purify you, and also get a talisman to ward off evil." He then took Shotaro to the priest and told him the whole story from the beginning and asked him to tell his fortune. After thinking about it, the priest said, "Misfortune is already approaching you, and this will not be an easy thing. This vengeful spirit has already taken the life of a woman, but its rage is not yet over. It has now set its sights on you, and your life is in jeopardy whether it be tonight or tomorrow morning. This vengeful spirit passed away 7 days ago, so from today for the next 42 days, you must tightly close the door to your home and remain under strict house arrest. If you follow my instructions, you may be able to escape death and at least keep your life. However, if you break this instruction even for a moment, if you do this, you will not be able to escape death," he said sternly, and then he took a brush and wrote characters in a style similar to ancient Chinese calligraphy all over Shotaro's back, from his hands and feet to the tips of his toes. He also gave him many paper amulets written in red ink and told him, "Put these amulets on every door you come across and pray to the gods and Buddha with all your heart. You must not disobey this commandment and bring about your own destruction." Shotaro was frightened on one hand, but also delighted, so he went home, stuck the amulets on his gates and windows, and began a life of strict confinement. That night, around midnight, a terrifying voice was heard from outside muttering, "Oh, how disgusting! There are sacred amulets stuck here," but the voice was never heard again. Shotaro was so frightened that he lamented the long night. Soon the night broke, and feeling relieved and revived, he quickly knocked on the wall that bounded Hikaroku's house to wake him up and told him about the previous night. When Hikaroku heard this, he thought it was strange that the words of the oracle had come true so suddenly, and he too stayed up that night, waiting for midnight to come. The wind was blowing through the pine trees so hard that it seemed as if it would blow something down, and it was even raining, creating an eerie night atmosphere that seemed like something strange was about to happen. Shotaro and Hikaroku called out to each other through the wall, and it was about 2 o'clock at that moment. At that moment, a red light suddenly flashed on the shoji screen of Shotaro's house, and a voice said, "Oh, how rude." "It's posted here too," but the voice sounded even more terrifying in the middle of the night, and Shotaro's hair and body shivered, and he fainted for a while. As dawn broke, they recounted the horrors of the previous night, and as the sun set, they impatiently waited for dawn to break. The next few dozen days seemed longer than 1,000 years. Every night, the vengeful spirit circled the house or shouted from the ridge of the roof, its angry voice growing more terrifying each night. And so the final night of the 42 days came. As the ritual had now come to an end for this night, they spent the night in particular in strict seclusion, and soon the dawn sky began to lighten. Feeling as if he had woken up from a long dream, Shotaro called out to Hikaroku, who leaned against the boundary wall, and asked, "What's the matter?" Shotaro said, "The monoimi has already ended. I haven't seen you at all these days. I miss you so much, and I'd like to talk to you to my heart's content about the pain and fear of the past month, and soothe my heart. Please wake up. I'll come over." Hikaroku was a naturally thoughtless man, so he said, "It's okay now. Come over here," and started to open the door, but before he had even opened it halfway, he heard a cry of "Ah!" from the eaves of Shotaro's house, which pricked his ears, and he fell on his bottom. Thinking that something must have happened to Shotaro, he grabbed his axe and went out to the main road. The night that Shotaro had seen dawn earlier was actually still dark, and although the moon was high in the sky, its light was dim and hazy, and the early winter wind blew coldly. He went to Shotaro's house, but the door was open, and Shotaro himself was nowhere to be seen. He jumped inside, thinking that he might have fled inside, but he was nowhere to be seen. The house was not large enough to hide anywhere, so he searched for him, thinking that he might have collapsed on the main road, but there was neither a shadow nor a shape there. Wondering what had happened, he lit a lamp to light the place and looked around, sometimes suspicious and sometimes afraid, and saw that fresh blood was splattered on the wall beside the door of Shotaro's house, which had opened up and was running down to the ground. However, no corpse or bones were to be found. Looking more closely in the moonlight, they saw something caught on the edge of the eaves. Holding the lamp up high, they saw only the top knot of the man's hair and nothing else. The shamefulness and horror of this sight is beyond description. After dawn, they searched the nearby fields and mountains, but in the end they were unable to find even a trace of it. So they informed the Izawa family of this, and in turn, in tears, Izawa informed the Kasada family. And so this story was passed down among the people of the world, with the idea that the priest's divination had come true, and that the bad omen predicted at the Okamahari ritual had indeed come true, and that God's will was truly sacred.